The following program is made possible through grants from the D.C. Community Humanities Council, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the Brotherhood of Railway and Airline Clerks.
Brother Cole would lead us in prayer.
God, this morning we are thankful that we are able to gather together, brothers. I ask thee to bless every member here one by one, because it's getting later than we think, oh God. And I'm asking everyone in this home to pray. Give me a prayer for myself. Being the man and the age I deserve. And pray for me, I'll pray for you. And may God take care of each and every one of you from this place to your return. Amen.
Amen. At this time, we have one of the old heads of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Chairman, fellow members, as we become more infirm, sickness, and so forth, sometimes we're confined, even to the nursing homes. Yet we have time to take out with our brothers of yesteryear. And I truly trust that you men coming along, that you too will reunite and communicate with one another and carry on the works of fellowship, brotherhood, and love. And we pass it on to you, and you can carry the banner on. Thank you, brother.
The retired Pullman porters still meet even today. These were the men who worked on the Pullman railroad cars, the sleeping cars and lounge cars. I can tell you that these retired porters are the last in a long line of men in this country. They represent 100 years of history, stretching from the days of slavery to the civil rights movement of today. I was born here in Washington, D.C., 1011 4th Street Northwest. On November the 4th, 1881. George Pullman started the Pullman Palace Car Company just after the Civil War, and it became one of the richest and most powerful companies in America. Pullman was a shrewd businessman. He not only built the cars, he also maintained ownership of them and hired the men to provide service to the passengers. They used to call the cars hotels on wheels because they were so elegant. And of course, the service was very elegant. The conductors who sold and collected tickets were always white men. But the personal service, which is what really made the Pullman Company famous, was provided by black men. Of course, in the early days, these men were former slaves. The porter had to do everything. He greeted passengers, carried baggage, made up the sleeping berths, tidied up the cars, served food and drinks, shined shoes, and had to be available night and day to wait on the passengers. For all this, the Pullman company paid the porter a very small salary. He had to depend on tips from the passengers to make a living. By the 1920s, Pullman employed more black workers than any other company in the United States. And the symbol of this elegant service that the company was selling was the humble Pullman porter.
Oh, yeah, you take it. Let's bring back old days, way back years back. Since I've retired from the road and everything, you know, and I'm glad to walk in a car like this and see it again, because the road made me what I am today.
This was the age of steam, when great locomotives pulled famous trains between the cities of the nation. In those days, the only way to travel was by train. And of course, wealthier people always rode in the Pullman cars.
This is one of the old diners here, of which you don't have too much room. They improved them through the years to be bigger and better. But they used to prepare potatoes, string beans, all of the green vegetables from scratch, from right here in this kitchen. And they always kept a pan there for fish and fish greases. Of course, they cooked with oil all the time, or butter. That made the food so much more delicious, too. Everything was cooked beautiful. They would come and with their trays, and they would get their water and everything that they need on the tray. Then they would come up through here, and of course the train is rolling all at the same time. And they would stand and brace themselves right here and serve back to the front. And of course the waiter always stood somewhere near where he could be conspicuously seen in order to take care of your needs. And he could see your finger. Well, of course, now back here is the parlor car, first class parlor car. These are special people back here. They got their own little table there, private table to each chair, and they have their private drinks back here with another attendant or a waiter to serve them their drinks and hors d'oeuvres if they so want. Select people. Don't want to be involved with the second-class citizens. Just, no. In other words, it's first-class people, and they went first class.
You remember these old cars when you used to come back serving people in the cars, you know? A person always comes to dine after. You can come back and have drinks and play cards.
This was a wonderful place to be in order for you to observe the countryside.
Well, the biggest, one beautiful thing about it, when passengers would come back, they'd depend on the porters, tell them everything about every stop and everything. So when they'd be going through the desert and all that and passing through big falls over big rivers, they'd come back and we'd be back in here and showing them and telling them, you know, about where they're at and what that was, what river that is, and all that.
It's truly unfortunate the average American doesn't get the chance or the opportunity to see American as this once has been, an era that has passed. Sometimes a passenger would be back here rather depressed, and sometimes you had to use a little philosophy to try to cheer that passenger up and make his trip or her trip an enjoyable one to a certain extent, to kind of take and put them in a different mood. Then there was a troublesome passenger, a fellow who got one drink too many. And the result of it is that sometimes you must use diplomacy in order to cope with the many things that you had to come in contact with.
And especially, you know, with old people, I used to go around and take a lot of time with them, see, sit down and talk to them and all that, you know. Well, you had to give them service. We give service them days, see. They don't have service today like we had them days.
Turn the lights on, will you please, so I can see what I'm doing. Richard, this is one of the old cars. Look, man, long time since I've seen one of these. This is a warning to you to keep them sharks off these people's backs.
Well, I'll do
If
that.
they'll get them, you know that.
Yes, that is true.
They will get them.
Yep, that's right.
Oh, look here, man. Let's make this bed.
This bed here?
Can you still make a bed, Richard?
Oh, yes.
Well, let's try it.
Okay, we'll
Break it
try.
down.
First.
Break it down.
Okay.
Break it back now. That's good. That's good.
We're going this way.
I don't know
the
which
head
way
here.
we're going.
No, we'll make the head over here.
Right. Make the head over here. Go on now. Right. Wait a minute, Rich, wait a minute. You better pull the headboard out.
Why, yes, we were going to do that later.
Right.
You are acting as though I don't know how.
Richard,
You know
it. Come on now. That's it. Don't pull it too far.
This is the headboard.
Right. That's to keep a man from breaking his neck.
And
Say,
this is the
listen.
light.
Right.
That's the
Let
light.
you break the upper down.
That'd be good.
Right. You better help let me make this bed before I quit you. Come on, man. All right? This is the lower berth mattress. I'm going to bring the lower berth mattress down. Put it on the lower part of the bed. Now, this mattress here is a little shorter than the upper berth mattress, so we have a bolster. This is the bolster. This finishes the bed out to make it complete. I'm going to throw this back there. Now, I'll put it right there. Now, you see, the mattress is complete now.
It's not quite complete.
Yeah, well, it's all right. It's good enough. However, look, I'm going to put on one sheet. This is the lower berth sheet. Okay. This goes next to the bottom sheet. Put this one on. Richard, this is it. It's a long time. I didn't think I'd ever do this again. Richard, I tell you, let me make this bed, man. You make the upper, Richard, right? You tall. The blanket goes next. In the old days, we'd have to put a third sheet on it, but we ain't gonna do that. We're gonna do this Pullman shortcut. This is the trick of part to use. This is to make the bed look pretty. You fold the sheet back once. You fold it back again. Tack it there. Fold it here. This is how a porter would make a bed. I believe I'm a little rusty now. You fold it back there, you come here, you bring it over there. Now, we don't have a pillow, so we'll put it in the center. Richard, how does it look, cuz?
It looks very good, except
what?
your...
I have to put your foot up, right?
That's right.
Okay. That's it. Now, you folks want to get in this bed? I swear, that's a good one.
Honey, you sure is wonderful in them clothes.
Yeah. I suppose these clothes is something to look at back here, honey. Where I've been while I've been training for the job, you wouldn't notice them. But you want to see them New York gals on Lenox Avenue.
Them gals is fast, I bet, switching themselves to catch the men. But, honey, you wouldn't look at none of them fast gals while you was away from home, would you?
There ain't none of them pretty in the face like my gal.
Many young men, especially if they were from a small town, wanted the job of a Pullman porter. It paid them a small income, maybe better than they could make at home. Plus, there was the excitement of traveling all across the nation. And the porters were known for their intelligence and their dignity. And so the job gave them a certain status with their friends and family. They even made a movie about it with Paul Robeson.
Met that hypocrite in the street. First thing you do was to show his teeth. Next thing you do was to tell a lie. Best thing to do is satisfy. Now let me fly. Let me fly. Let me fly to my side. I got a mother in the promised land. Never. Goodbye, folks. Goodbye, brother. Take care of yourself. Goodbye, Mama.
The Pullman porters were really kind of a fraternity. The men worked long hours on the road together, and they helped each other with the work duties. On their layovers at the end of the line, the men stayed in quarters provided by the company. They were often pretty bad facilities, but the porters made the best of it. They would catch up on sleep or play cards. You know, the porters had their own card game they called bid whist. And of course, the porters were always big storytellers.
See, I was running on a top train, silver medium, from New York to Miami, one playground to the other. And I picked this passenger up at New York. There was a white lady and a colored lady. Well, the white lady had a little dog, a little poodle, in her arms, and was directing me and the red cap as to what to do with the bags. So I told the red cap, put them all in the room, you know, and we'd get it straight once we get on the way. Well, the white lady was doing all of the ordering around, while the colored lady was just right along with. And I thought this colored lady was the maid, you know. And I goes back to the club car portion of my car, where the maid is sitting out there drinking the coke. I say, well, you know, workers get together, you know. I asked her, I say, well, how does the lady treat you? She treat you all right? She said, oh, yes, she's very nice. I said, well, that little dog, usually they have the maid with the dog. Oh, well, no, she keeps the dog real close to her, she tells me. And to make a long story short, the next day, we're coming into Hollywood, Florida, where they were getting off. And finally she said, well, you can get our bags now. The bags didn't have a name on it. And I took them all out except one little handbag that the maid was carrying. I thought was the maid. And I told them, you know, I kept weaving and bounding. Is there anything else? You know, nobody that hadn't greased the palm yet, you know. So was everything all right, you know? I'd open up the door. I let them know everywhere that they could walk the dog, you know. And so I finally got this little bag, a little handbag, overnight bag, from the maid, I thought was the maid, and looked on it had a name on it, Ella Fitzgerald. Now, all day, all night, I rode all day with her, and I didn't know Ella Fitzgerald.
On the train, the porter met celebrities, politicians, and wealthy white people who would otherwise never associate with blacks. The porter was a gracious host and friend to these passengers, and people happily entrusted their children to his care because he was seen as such a kind and gentle figure.
Porter,
Porter!
give us more air, will you, quick?
Porter! The window, please close!
Porter, this pillow is as hard as a rock.
Porter, come give me some more clothes!
Porter, come here, sir.
Porter, stay there!
All night the people complain. We is Porter, Dandy Porter. We run on the vestibule train.
No matter that he was a gracious host on the sleeping cars, when the train pulled in, the porter lost the so-called privilege of being the friend and confidant of white passengers. He was still a black man and a second-class citizen.
I had 6 brothers, and my father was dead, and my mother was there. And she'd said to me quite a few times, I don't know what we're going to have for dinner. I don't have any money. And my brothers started to stay out with the girls, I guess. Stay out all night and don't bring any money home. And my mother was struggling, trying to make me stay in college. Finally, I decided that I had to quit. I didn't want to see her suffer. So I came to the Pullman Company. I had the opportunity that I passed up. After being out here on the road, working as a Pullman porter and seeing the things that go on, I have sit right here on these seats and cried a million nights because I did not go to college and finish college. The opportunity was there, but it was hard. And I couldn't afford to see my mother suffer as she did.
No matter how intelligent or well-educated he was, it was difficult for a black man in the 1920s to get the kind of job he deserved. For the most part, his choice was between the overalls of a laborer or the crisp uniform of a Pullman porter. The Pullman Company was able to exploit the situation and paid low wages to highly qualified men. The result was that men who could have been lawyers or accountants, and in some cases were lawyers or accountants, had to accept a job earning only $67.50 a month in 1925.
Back in the old days, on the Crescent Limited, Sunset Limited, all of the southern trains, Silver Media as well, Seaboard Coast Line, they had a petition that would come all the way and almost blind these 2 tables. And these 2 tables were for colored dining people. And all that portion of the dine up there is for white people to eat. And this is a long way that railroad has come to in modern times. It's hard for people to really realize that these kind of conditions existed during this time.
Oh, in the early days when we first came on, we had one little bed on the couch in the smoking room. And the smoking room was where we shine our shoes, and you only had 2.5 hours of sleep. And during the night, when you're trying to sleep, somebody comes in and leaves the door open, and all night long the door is slamming. The door is slamming. And like you can't get any sleep.
The low pay and long hours were unjust, but even worse was the absolute lack of job security. If a porter were accused of breaking a rule, he was assumed to be guilty and never given a hearing.
And but along with that, you had to be so careful because anybody got on the train then it wrote you up, say you didn't shine his shoes, or you didn't brush him off when he got on, or he didn't like your attitude, or you didn't smile when you spoke to him. He'd call you in, dress you down, and put you in the streets for probably 10 days. Now, you didn't miss a whole lot of money because they won't pay you nothing now. But the principle was you won't eat more than that much.
Passengers called every porter George, as if he were George Pullman's boy. They expected him to always smile for them. So the porters themselves often called the job, ironically, miles of smiles. But sometimes it was not so easy.
Well, Hayes was a big politician, it appeared, and he didn't like colored people. And he had an audience, and he was just wanted to show some of his friends how they act down south, how they treat nigger, you know. And so he missed the Cospedor and spit on the floor, and of which I had to clean it up, and I made mention to it. That that's the reason this Cospedor was there, for him to spit in it. And he was going to show his friends how to treat a nigger, you know. And he booted me, of course, and I was in the process of cleaning it up.
And I came back through the club car with 4 bags, 2 on each arm, 1 on each arm and 1 in each hand. And this man he was pretty well loaded, sitting there with some woman, and he stopped me by his breath and said, "Say, don't you pull off your hat in the dining car." I said, "I'm not in the dining car. If I was, I would still wouldn't pull my hat off because I have no hand to hold it with." He said, "Well, don't you come back through here with your hat on." Well, I was quite young then in the service, and I didn't care. So I went up and I told this old porter, "I'm going back there. Give me my ice pick." So he told me it's not worth it. So when I thought about it, I said, well, here's a man that don't know what a dining car is from a club car. And if I go back there and create a problem, I'm just as stupid as he is. So I ignored the whole thing.
You either accept it or you reject it. It depends on what kind of porter you are. Well, I accepted it. But of course I didn't like it. Well, what can you do?
But in 1925, we heard about some man in the East writing about organizing the Pullman porters into a union. And of course, I had been there just long enough to see what the conditions were, and I had sense enough to know that this guy was on the right track, whoever he was, talking about organizing the porters into a union. And his name was A. Philip Randolph.
Mr. Randolph was born the son of a preacher in Florida in 1891. He moved to Harlem when he was 20 years old and became interested in socialism. Even then, he wanted to unionize black workers. Of course, at that time, that was an unheard of idea. There were no black unions, and hardly any blacks were allowed to join the white unions. But a group of porters, led by Mr. Ashley L. Totten, came to Mr. Randolph and asked him to help them organize. And he said that he would. In fact, he said, the Pullman porter seems to be made to order to carry the gospel of unionism in the colored world. His home is everywhere. So on the night of August 25th, 1925, in the Elks Lodge at 129th Street in Harlem, Mr. Randolph called a meeting of 500 porters, and the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters was born.
In 1927, I was running to St. Louis, Missouri, and a man from Nashville came in my car who was a porter also in the early morning. He told me, he said, you know, Randolph, who was trying to organize the porters, is going to speak in St. Louis today at the Pine Street YMCA.
He said, I'm going up to him. He said, I wish you'd go along with me. I said, maybe I will go along with you. And when I heard him talk, he convinced me that he knew what he's doing. Although I didn't agree with some of the things he said. For instance, at that time, we'd making $72.50 a month. And he said that if you stick with me, the day is soon coming out, have you making $150 a month. I couldn't believe that, but I went along and I put $1 in the collection plate.
The company wanted to penalize these men. And in fact, the company started another sort of a union, which of course was not a union. So there was the people who felt that they had to be in the company union. But the men under Mr. Randolph continued to talk to the men. But all of this had to be done secretly. That is where I came in here in Washington. The men here were afraid, and somebody had to go around and keep them informed as to what was being done. So all of the literature, all of the propaganda was sent to me. And I would secretly go among the men and disseminate this news and collect dues. Now that's how I became active in this brotherhood.
And of course, the Pullman Company had what is known as a porter instructor down. That's what's his title. But we call him a snitcher because everything he found out about porters, he reported. And even though that he's supposed to have been a porter instructor, he sat in that meeting and he made a note of every porter who was there.
Now, we had a meeting at a certain home once, and the company found out that we had this meeting. So they called the husband in, the porter in, and asked him about it. The porter was able to show by his time sheet that he was out of town. But his wife held the meeting.
So I got home, before I got off train, the superintendent there told me, I understand you attend the meeting of the Brotherhood yesterday in St. Louis. I said, yes, I did. So we're going to I'll tell you right now, we ain't going to have none of our porters attending the Brotherhood meeting. I said, well, if somebody told you I attended the meeting there, maybe they told you also that I joined yesterday. Before he could answer me, I said, and of course, before I joined, I thought about what lawyer I wanted to handle my case if you started messing with my job, man. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drag anybody in the court and mess with my job. I didn't even know a lawyer name at that time. But I bluffed him out. They didn't bother me. And from then on, I was strong supporter of A. Philip Randolph.
Mr. Randolph directed the Brotherhood out of his office in Harlem with a small group of men. Mr. Milton P. Webster of Chicago was the first vice president and Mr. Randolph's right-hand man. And Mr. C.L. Dellums was a vice president and leader of the Brotherhood's division on the West Coast.
I started work for the Pullman Company in January of 1924. And I got fired as a result of my union activities around the 1st of October of 1927. Well, when I went over to see the superintendent, Mr. O.W. Snoddy, he spent all of the time, he sat there for at least an hour, talking to me about my union activities. And he said, all we are doing is furnishing you transportation over this country to spread this Randolph Bolshevik propaganda, you know. And Randolph gets his money from Moscow. I said, don't you know how to pronounce that word? That's not Moscow, it's Moscow. I began to kind of rib him some. I saw my discharge on his desk when I went in, so I knew that, you know, I'm there to be discharged. So after he spent all of that time, and then he handed me my discharge, and I started to get up, he said, Delos, now I want you to remember one thing. You're not being fired for your union activities. You're fired for unsatisfactory service.
Although their jobs were on the line, the men of the Brotherhood fought back, at one point even threatening the company with a strike. They gained the support of white labor unions and fought for fair labor laws from the federal government. But it was tough going because Brother Randolph was preaching a new philosophy that was even opposed by many black leaders, including ministers and newspapermen. He said that black people should not beg white businessmen for fair pay and better working conditions. They should organize and demand them. Porter Tucker came home one day and said that he'd been taken off of his line. So I went to the station, to the office of the superintendent. I told him that I wanted to know why my husband, B.J. Tucker, had been taken off his line. He said, now, why are you taking this matter up? Why doesn't Tucker take it up? I said, the sign-out man, I knew his name at that time, said that nothing in hell could move Tucker from that line but his wife's activities in the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. You put my husband back on his line or I'll be back. Well, it was amusing because he seemed to have a fear because a black woman would come to a superintendent with the power he had and speak to him in that manner. Well, the next time my husband got back on his run. Now, there had been other times that porters had been penalized for certain things. Their wives would go and beg for them, plead for them. Please take my husband back. But Sister Tucker didn't do that. Finally, on August 25th, 1937, 12 years to the day since the first Brotherhood meeting in Harlem, the Pullman Company surrendered. They signed the first agreement ever made between a large American corporation and a union of black workers.
It can be truthfully stated that the Brotherhood has achieved job security. Before these agreements existed, porters were unceremoniously fired upon the slightest pretext. It was practically unknown for the porter, when once discharged for anything, to be restored to his job, without the said porter crawling upon his belly and with great humiliation begging his boss for another chance. What a wages! In this connection, it is no exaggeration to say that before the Brotherhood championed the cause of the porter, this class of workers were not only the industrial paupers on the railroads of the United States and Canada, but pitiful beggars with hands outstretched for the arms of tips. Yes, the Brotherhood took the porter out of the lap of industrial and public charity and made him a self-respecting worker. It brought, for the first time, sunshine, cheer, comfort, some luxury, and hope into the porter's home for his wife and children.
So, maybe a couple of years after that, Mr. Carey, we were down there for something, and the man who was the head of the Pullman Company was named Champ Carey. I guess his name was Champ, that's all we ever heard. And he said to Mr. Randolph, would it be an imposition for me to ask for a conference, Mr. Randolph, with you and Mr. Webster and Mr. Dellums? I just want to sit around and talk. We're friends nowadays. I said, you mean friendly enemies? And, well, we get along, he said, nowadays, and let's talk. I think we're doing pretty good. And he said, now, let's be frank about this thing. Here was a handful of colored people, Negroes, got together here and took on the Pullman Company. You know the Pullman Company is one of the most powerful industrial institutions in the nation. How the hell did you figure to win? We knew you were crazy in hell. There was no way to win, but you did. And we're still wondering, how the hell did you do it? So, Mr. Randolph said, well, Mr. Carey, we've thought about it a lot. We've talked about it a lot. We're not too certain ourselves how we won, he said. But I guess we could summarize it by saying dedication and integrity.
After the Brotherhood had won the right to organize the porters, the Pullman Company found that they had been defeated. And to make themselves look good, they sent A. Philip Randolph a check, signed check. All he'd have to put the amount of money he wanted in the check, and on the bottom of it said not to exceed $1 million. I said it had been hard for you to find a man or a woman, or a person for that concerned, that wouldn't have accepted that check and draw a real amount of money off it. But Randolph made a photostatic copy of that picture, that check, and framed it, hung it on his wall, and sent the written check back to the Pullman Company and told them the Negro principle was not for sale.
This is a song, Marching Together, that I wrote in 1939. It tells a story of the Ladies Auxiliary to the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. The Brotherhood brought out qualities of strength and courage in the porters and their wives. They became leaders in their communities, bought homes, and sent their children to college. Thus, the porters were able to give their sons and daughters the opportunities they themselves had been denied to become lawyers and teachers and businessmen. As an organization, the Brotherhood laid the foundation for the civil rights movement in this country. It inspired black people by proving that they could organize and get results. For example, there was the Ladies Auxiliary, which raised money and supported the work of the Brotherhood during its darkest days. I myself was the International Secretary, Treasurer, and President of the local here in Washington, D.C. In the labor movement, the American Federation of Labor had always resisted black membership until the Brotherhood broke down those barriers. The porter changed the image of blacks from strikebreakers to strong Union men. And in 1941, Mr. Randolph forced President Franklin Roosevelt to create the Fair Employment Practices Commission by threatening a mass march on Washington by thousands of black people. Years later, he organized the famous 1963 March on Washington. In 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Mrs. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus for a white man. Her arrest sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, which marked the beginning of the modern civil rights movement. Most people associate the boycott with Dr. Martin Luther King, But it was the Pullman porter, Mr. E.D. Nixon, who originated the idea and who organized the boycott.
They arrested her and threw her in jail like a common criminal. So I made bond for her, and I said to Miss Parks after we got her home, I said, you know what? I said, I'd like to use your case to break down segregation on the buses. And then I recorded in a number of names on tape recorder that night. And the next morning I got up and started calling them, telling them about what had happened. I said, it's my decision now that we organize a bus boycott and fight this discrimination on busing. Ralph D. Abernathy, which most of you probably heard of, was the first man I called. He said, yeah, Brother Nixon, I'll go along with you. I said, that's fine. And I called next man, Reverend H.H. Hubbard. I expected him to go along with me because, number one, he's president of the Ministers' Alliance, and number two, he was my pastor of the church I went to, because I didn't expect him to fight me. So Ralph really told me he'd go along with me. The third person I called was Martin Luther King, and he said, Brother Nixon, let me think about it a while and call me back. So I went on and called 18 people and called them back. He said, yeah, Brother Nixon, I decided I'm going to go along with you. I said, I'm glad you decided to go along with me, Reverend King. I said, your church is the only church right downtown. And I told 18 other people to meet at your church this evening at 3 o'clock, and it looked kind of bad to have that many people coming up to your church for a meeting of this kind, and you weren't there. So he said, well, I'm going to be there. I said, all right. So we set up this meeting, and that was Friday, December the 2nd, and Sunday morning, December the 4th, the headline was Negroes boycotting the Montgomery City line. And, of course, I got hold of the paper that morning, and it's a very good story. I called every minister in town. Have you read the paper this morning? And some no and some yes. And read it. Take it to church with you. Tell the people at the church that we want 2,000 people at the Whole Street Baptist Church tomorrow night. If I hadn't known about anything about organized labor, you wouldn't have had them out there. And then after that, that's why Reverend King came in the picture. He was elected that night.
But I want it to be known that the humble Pullman porter, the man who had been kicked around and shoved around and worked without adequate pay, was the man that stimulated and worked for and fought for this boycott in Montgomery.
I was able to make a contribution solely because we had the brotherhood, and I wasn't afraid. And again, I have to come back to A. Philip Randolph. In my judgment, A. Philip Randolph was the greatest black man we had in the last 100 years.
It is a fact in which the organization takes great pride that the old days of abuse have gone.
He died at the age of 90 years, 1 month and 1 day old. And last time I remember saw him, he didn't hardly know who I was. But he's my friend. He's my kind of man.
I had a man in Texas once to get on my car. And he went to the club car and he got pretty full. I was back in the smoker, trying to shine shoes. And he came back with all kind of stories about it. He had a Negro mammy, and he loved black people. And he worried me, so I'd go out and get other shoes and come back, he'd still be there. So he worried me so much, finally he says, and you know that it's a shame how these Negroes rape these people, isn't it? What you think should be done to them? About that time I was filled up. I says, pardon me, do you wish me to answer you as a servant or answer you as a man. He said, answer me as a man. I said to him, I said, sir, in the Negro race, they can get a woman as black as a shoe. They can get a woman as green as an olive. They can get a woman as white as a white woman. I said, but in the white race, I never see a black-white woman. I said, now, ask yourself the question, who is the rapist? I think I go to bed. He resented and he got up and went to bed. He walked out.
The Porters knew that being a servant was simply a role that they put on and took off along with their uniforms. They weren't ashamed of being servants, but they never lost sight of the fact that first and foremost, they were men.
I think that you have the courage, dignity, and respect for yourself, respect for people, that you can be a man while being a servant.
We need no introduction, you can see just who we are. Holders on a Pullman train, yes sir. Standing at the platform of the sleeping car, ready, quick, and willing to explain. Where you is located, we must be remunerated. Don't forget the little friendly tip. We think you ought to give us a quarter, for then you'll have a very pleasant trip.
The porter has often been depicted as an object of ridicule in movies and songs. He had to struggle against this popular image of himself as an Uncle Tom.
Anything that you can do it with your head up. It's what you think of yourself.
Right.
If you think you're an Uncle Tom, you are an Uncle Tom, whether you're a Pullman porter or whatever you are.
That's right.
But I never thought that I was a Pullman, Uncle Tom.
But now that's my philosophy.
Yeah.
To get along with people with a smile. A smile.
Doesn't mean you're Uncle Tom.
When you smile, that don't mean you're Uncle Tommy. You're meeting a man on an equal basis. The right hand of fellowship means so much, you know. But Tommy, no way.
Another thing, when the passenger come in and the first thing you do, he want to grin, he's smiling and he's pleasant, and you can be pleasant with him without grinning, as we call it. You can treat him nice without that. You don't have to do that. And if he's going to tip me because I'm going to grin, I don't need it and don't want it. But if he tipped me because of my service, that's what I'm there for, to give him that service.
Today, the elegant cars of the Pullman Company no longer roll across America. In 1969, the once mighty Pullman Company went out of business, and the railroad stopped the practice of hiring only black men as porters. In 1978, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters ceased to exist as a separate organization and merged with the larger Brotherhood of Railway and Airline Clerks. In 1979, A. Philip Randolph died. And so, you would have to say that the era of the Pullman porter is over. There is a poem by Langston Hughes that contains these lines. And porters on a railroad car who make, each time they make a bed, a hammock on a star that sings in space the dawn song of a race.
want to make one summation, and that is that you can see, gentlemen, as to why the brotherhood was so vowed to us, and why it made us what we are.
Well, we are characters.
We're all,
come on, let's play. You want to play the hand?
A man of the first magnitude.
Do you?
We're almost able to look through muddy water and see dry land. As you can see,
come on.
As you can see, we have an answer to all the problems. And as you can see, we are orators, and we are also clowns, in a sense, and we're also gentlemen. Thank you all very much. And God bless you. Cut.
This program was made possible through grants from the D.C. Community Humanities Council, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the Brotherhood of Railway and Airline Clerks.